You're joking, aren't you? It's the Teesside Chef. Easy classic Irish soda bread. And as an Englishman, I love doing Irish recipes because it always gives me the opportunity to ponder how the English have brutalised the Irish for centuries, even though they never taught me a word about it at school. But even though I had British imperial superiority forced down my throat in history class, I was luckily still able to emerge with some critical thinking skills, and after objective analysis, I have concluded that this Irish soda bread is the easiest bread to make ever. Because all we need is 500 grams of all-purpose flour, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 2 teaspoons of brown sugar, although you can use white sugar if you like, a level teaspoon of baking soda, and don't overdo it with your baking soda here. You might think, I'll pour in a little bit extra because that'll help the bread rise more. But that baking soda will leave a nasty taste if you use too much of it, and you'll see later how well this bread will rise with just a scant level teaspoon of baking soda. And 350 millilitres of buttermilk, and that's it for our ingredients. I do have an Irish potato bread recipe for those of you that might be interested, but there are no potatoes here. And the lack of potatoes brings me handily to the time when there were no potatoes in Ireland either because of the potato blight. And the British government of the time sat on their hands and allowed at least 1 million, but probably many more Irish people, to starve to death. 1 million dead and 1 million fled, they say. So I'm bringing this dough together roughly with a big spoon. It might seem a little dry at first, but don't worry. When you've brought it together a bit, just let it autolyse or soak up that moisture by leaving it to its own devices for a bit. Charles Trevelyan did that to the Irish, as the Great Irish Famine struck in the 1840s. Left them to their own devices, that is. Responsible for the British government's response to the catastrophe, Trevelyan believed that the judgment of God sent the calamity to teach the Irish a lesson. He also believed the famine to be an effective mechanism for reducing surplus population. So he sounds like a nice fella. Just bringing this dough together properly now with me hands, by mashing it together and crushing its spirit with a complete lack of basic human compassion and empathy. Yeah, so the British ruling classes of the time thought of the Irish Catholic peasantry as vermin and subhuman, and happily exported food grown in Ireland that could have fed the starving millions to England during the crisis to be sold for profit. Some historians say they were rigidly sticking to their economic ideology. Others would posit it was a calculated act of genocide. And now I've brought the dough together properly, I'm going to shape it to my will now, and that's something that the British have never been able to do to the Irish. I'm not committing genocide on this dough ball to enforce my ordnance like. I'm just using my hands to form a dough disc. And once the dough disc is roughly formed, we can get it on a floured baking sheet. And I've lined my baking sheet with baking paper. And once it's on there, I'm going to shape it a little bit more into a round. And I want this round to be about 4 or 5 centimetres thick. My oven's already on, and I've set it to 180 degrees Celsius, fan setting, and that's about 360 degrees Fahrenheit. And now I'm just going to score the top, and this is going to help this easy soda bread bake nicely, just like the resentment has quite justifiably baked in the Irish towards the British ruling classes for centuries. The dough is quite sticky, so cutting straight through might deform the dough too much if you cut it through in one piece. So I like to score into quarters, starting from the middle and cutting towards the edges. And once the dough is scored in 4 places, it's a lot easier and tidier to then go through and make a final score. And I like to go at least halfway through with the knife. And this soda bread will need about 30 minutes and will be crispy on top. And when tapped on the bottom, it will sound as hollow as a British apology. Because let's remember that it was only a couple of years ago that conservative right-wing supercrank Priti Patel was threatening the Irish with food shortages over their Brexit stance. But a complete lack of self-awareness and obliviousness to history by today's British ruling class notwithstanding, here it is now. It's risen up smashing, just like the Irish did in 1919. It has a lovely light golden colour, so I'm going to get it on a grid to cool. And you want to let this cool fully now, but I didn't really, because I like the idea of doing things early, like cutting warm bread or shutting down soup kitchens that are keeping hundreds of thousands of starving people alive in the 19th century. Yep, the British government actually did that. Shutting down soup kitchens that were feeding starving people. Look it up. So there's a sneaky peek of the inside, and you can see the crumb there, and this has come out lovely, this has, I have to say. And before I go, I'm going to toast me a piece because it's just far too tempting, this. This should be eaten the day that it's made, but if you don't do that, make sure you freeze it as soon as it's fully cooled, if you can, because it doesn't stay fresh for long. But it toasts really well, and with lashings and lashings of butter, you'll be rewarded for all your hard work making this, and you'll deserve your reward, unlike Charles Trevelyan, who was inexplicably knighted in 1848, while the people he was commissioned to help were still dying and fleeing in their tens of thousands. Easy, really easy, Irish soda bread. Almost as easy as ignoring relatively recent history. Thanks for watching, everyone. Sarah.